So to keep things moving, before we get into our next panel, really excited to share a recorded address from BLab US Canada's CEO, Jorge Fontanes. He unfortunately wasn't able to join us live today, but he really wanted to be able to connect with y'all and just talk a little bit about the movement. So I will pass things over. Emmanuel, if you want to cue up that video. Dana, are you good? Okay, cool.
Hello, Be Local leaders, and congratulations on organizing your first regional Midwest build. My name is Jorge Fontanes, CEO of BLab US and Canada, and I am so pleased to have been asked to share this brief message with you. First and foremost, build is an opportunity for you to build community and learn from one another. And so I want you to know that I'm grateful for your leadership as you deepen your engagement in our movement. Second, we are seeing real growth of the movement globally and in the Midwest. That is so exciting to see a group of leaders stepping up, showing you are already dedicated to meeting this moment and joining BLab in creating long-lasting systems change. Third, I want you to know you're already a part of an important change in your region. BLab is expanding its vision beyond certification to shifting hearts and minds and affecting policy. If we are here to create an economic system to benefit all people on the planet, this is what it will take. We have a history already of collective action that has been a signal of the B Corp community's drive to decarbonize the economy with its net zero commitments, and also to dismantle unjust systems with the growth of our Black, Indigenous, people of color network, and our Level program, which, if you're unfamiliar, is what supports businesses facing systemic challenges to economic empowerment and supports them also through B Corp certification. We're really lucky to have this program offered to those businesses and business leaders. I cannot wait to see what you all do next to build on this history of building a movement of action. So finally, let me leave you with what it means to bring that action locally, because local action matters too. Our networks and Be Locals are critical to realizing our theory of change. Allow me to share some thoughts about how you can get involved and activate on local issues. There are over 127 million acres of agricultural land in the Midwest, which means that this area is uniquely impacted by ongoing climate change, fracking, and other environmental disruptions. This also means the businesses of the Midwest are uniquely positioned to generate truly innovative solutions in tandem with climate activists and land defenders surrounding these shared issues within the agricultural sector. You are all interconnected in these communities. Truly taking a justice lens to your business means going beyond what is traditionally called DEI efforts and examining how power, privilege, and white supremacy culture in our organization continues to persist. It starts by shifting also the mindsets of business leaders to understand what justice looks like, so we can imagine together. This will also mean getting uncomfortable, and many of us coming to face with how we, as well-intentioned leaders, have perpetuated harm in society by upholding barriers that prevent all people from living a full and dignified life. Change does have to start from the top, but it also starts by leaders changing their mindset as individuals to intentionally create space for the people whose first-hand lived experiences provide the insights when they are truly included at the table to co-create those solutions. This takes real time, it takes trust building, and it also takes a lot of unlearning. I want to encourage you all to think about how you can commit to long-term collaboration and commitment to learning, unlearning, and building community. Find ways to expand your networks today and look for more opportunities from us at BLab US in Canada to facilitate more collaboration and connection across B-Locals in the US and Canada, and soon to include Puerto Rico, where my family's from. Thank you for listening and have a great day today. I appreciate you all and your commitment to this good work. You are more than amazing. You are a visible force of business for good.
Right, great. Some really great words from Jorge there, and I think really speaking to those three pillars of BLab, which are racial equity, environmental justice, and stakeholder governance. So to kind of keep things moving in that direction, I'm excited for our next panel, which is Centering Racial Equity and Justice Within Midwest Cities. And moderating our second panel today is Sergio Manacero. So yeah, with that, take it away, Sergio. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Nice to be here with everybody at the first Midwest Build. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm looking forward to this panel. And so I'd like to just start by letting the panel introduce themselves, and we can start with JP.
Oh, how'd I get that lucky draw? So I'm JP Johnson, a co-founder of a company called Blackrock Consulting, LLC here in the city of St. Louis, representing the region of St. Louis. Started Blackrock in December of 2017. Myself and a colleague of mine who, thank you, Lisa, a colleague of mine who both worked in city government. I worked in the mayor's office. He worked in the city council's office. We were both at the retirement of the mayor, ushering off to do non-government related work, but we still wanted to engage in projects and be involved in ecosystems and networks that were still doing public good. And so we started Blackrock with the intention of continuing those projects and hopefully from a business perspective, being able to be more nimble than we were in government, because anybody who's worked in government understands the red tape. So getting to execute on the passions that we have while also being innovative and creative from a public good perspective. So I'll stop there because I know we only have an hour, and we'll let everybody else get it.
Thank you so much, JP. Saidirick, did I say your name correctly?
It's Cedric.
Cedric, sorry.
Yeah.
But please, Cedric, introduce yourself and talk about what you do with the Green Homeowners.
Certainly. Good afternoon to everyone. Cedric Walker, Program Manager with Green Homeowners United. And what we do is we take a local approach to doing energy efficiency upgrades for homeowners within underserviced communities. We have a platform or a mandate from a social enterprise. We are for profit, but our goal is to take local workers or local people in the communities, training those people to do the energy efficiency upgrades, the HVAC systems, all of those types of things, so that they can have those skills, so that they can, and of course we are a local labor, we were part of the local labor union, 113, and we want to have those people earn livable wages so that we can empower the people living in those areas that have the highest energy burdens to be able to, partake in, the floodgates are open for opportunities to help the environment, but also help their living conditions, lowering their energy burden, lowering, heating up their home much better living conditions. And what we do is just take a simple approach. We're going to take that house, make it more energy efficient. That person's going to have a higher standard of living, much better air quality, things of that sort. And we just want to get involved, I guess, at the ground level and take that approach from Green Homeowners United.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Becca, you introduce yourself and what you do.
Thank you, Sergio. Sunrise Banks, where we are located in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So the epicenter of the violence that occurred in 2020. We are, I would call us the social engine for good. We really focus in on empowering financial wellness and closing the financial equity gap for all. And that looks and smells in different ways, whether it's the actions that we take on Capitol Hill, whether it's our IT mortgages that gives immigrants a home, where typically most banks, all banks require a social security number. We have credit builder products. We really focus on the individual and the small business who are looking to make their home here, whether they're a new American, whether they're a new college or a college student graduating, et cetera. But, it's not just me saying that, we're social engine for good. We have, like many of you, we're a B Corp. We're also a community development financial institution, which mandates that 60% of our loans are in low to moderate income communities. We're also a benefit corporation, and we're part of the Global Alliance for Banking and Values. So that not only takes a part of people and taking care of financial equity for people, but also, that environment, the climate piece. So Saidirick and I in our introductory call, totally connected, and just about the work that we're both doing on both ends of the spectrum.
Well, thank you. So we can probably go back to JP and talk about how the climate of your city is right now, and how your company is responding to the needs of your community.
Yeah, well, climate-wise, the weather's actually pretty great today. It's not typically the case for St. Louis. But on a more serious note, St. Louis is going through some transitions, like a lot of other urban metropolises. I can say that St. Louis is very proud to have its first Black woman mayor in the history of our existence. Tashara Jones was elected on April of 2021, and she has taken the approach that areas of the city that has seen lots of disinvestment, both intentionally and just from a poor public policy standpoint, in terms of folks who have wanted to reverse the trends. She's taken an intentional approach that those areas will see the highest investments, given all of the resources that have been given to us because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so one of the things that the federal government did when it doled out billions of dollars across the country was base it off census tracts in terms of poverty rates. St. Louis has close to a 30% poverty rate. Now 30% on a city that's 300,000, in a region that's about 2.8 million, it's pretty high. And so while we are not proud of high rates of poverty, which obviously leads to a whole host of inequities from education, housing, et cetera, it does present a very unique opportunity to take this once in a lifetime lump sum and put it into programs that can be more catalytic for further development and investment, so we can bridge the gap on the inequities that we face. And so in terms of our present day climate, Mayor Jones is about a year and a half into office now. And obviously government moves slow, but I present that background to say where companies like Blackrock come in is we're able to fill some gaps where government is unable to do so, either because there's so much red tape, either because things move slower, because things are inherently political. And a lot of times when you have nonprofits and businesses, not that they aren't political as well, but to a lesser degree, they're able to tackle certain issues without the lens of there being a winner and loser from a political perspective in terms of who's going to get elected to do what next. And so from a government relations perspective, we step in and help to design blueprints for government to be able to follow, since they have more of the employees. Sometimes we take on the project management piece of it. That way there is actually a person that can be an effective executor of whatever the blueprint is. An example of that is I actually consult for the St. Louis Development economic development corporation here in the city of St. Louis that's been around for some 40 years on several multimodal projects that are happening downtown. So updating our streets, because a lot of folks don't know this, but the way streets are designed, it goes to development, and usually from an urban planning perspective, there's a lot of racial history involved in that as well, on who can stay and who can't, who's welcome and who's not, who has access and who doesn't. But we also do it from when we're talking about government policies. We also tackle it from a sustainability perspective as well, because we see a lot of intersectionality with who's at the table and who's not. So whose issues actually get addressed and which ones not. And so the climate is both going through some changes because of a lot of the negatives that we faced, particularly for the last 2 generations in specific. But we're also in a unique place because the opportunities are pretty boundless and the resources are finally there for us to tackle some of these long issues. And again, I am aware that time is of the essence. So
that's very interesting. You seem to be like right in a very good position to be able to do a lot of impact in St. Louis, right? With the goals that you guys have as a consulting firm. So
yeah, I mean, the benefit for me is, and again, I'm very fortunate. I worked for the mayor's office, I worked for the comptroller's office, and I worked for the license collector's office, which is the business office in the city of St. Louis. You cannot have a business in the city or within the 67 square miles of St. Louis unless you go through the license collector's office. And so I've seen it on the inside, and sort of take that knowledge and then utilize it from a business perspective, where you are more innovative, can be more nimble. It is afforded us a lot of opportunity, and we hope to go with it.
That's great. And Cedric, same question. What's the tension and climate like in your city, and how are you as a company? You said you're doing some work giving people tools and the skills to kind of help themselves, but what else is your company doing?
Sure. And I will begin by just telling a short story and just giving a little bit of background. And I think this will set the tone for most of our conversation, is that I'm, I guess, an immigrant to Milwaukee. I moved here 8 years ago to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Had previously lived in Washington State, just south of Seattle, for a number of years. When I came here to Milwaukee, my eyes were completely just opened to the inequalities as far as racially and culturally. Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in America. It's very high on the list. You have blacks, you have browns, you have Asians, you have whites, and they pretty much stay in those areas. So for me, it was a real eye-opener that there's something wrong with a multitude of systems that we have. How did it get this way? And so I say it was an eye-opener because previously, I think personally, I had been sheltered from seeing a lot of inequality. But being in Milwaukee, realizing that our school systems are just ill-prepared to prepare the next generation, the incarceration rates are just so high. It's one of those things that, and for me, looking at it, because when I first moved, I didn't know the area, so I moved here, and just the amount that me personally I was spending for my utilities here in Milwaukee, and it's typically in the underserviced areas that we have that highest burden, energy burden, and so I wanted to do something about that, and I looked for opportunities to do that, and what I did is I endeavored to find places that had those similar goals. I worked with the low-income weatherization program. I came over to Green Homeowners United because I saw that they had a vision to do something about what was happening. And Green Homeowners United, again, we take that approach of training the people that are in the area that are living in these homes to insulate their attics, training the homeowners, or helping them, I should say, to connect to resources that they could get the upgrade that maybe the capital that's required, they wouldn't have access to those resources. So what we've endeavored to do with Green Homeowners United is pool those resources as far as a block grant. Perhaps it's a community organization that they are working with Habitat for Humanity, working with Revitalize Milwaukee, different agencies that they want to service veterans, they want to service disabled, they want to service those that have been marginalized. And if there are people living in those homes, we can train them to do those types of upgrades and have those livable wages. It's just something that I felt that was, hey, this is what we need to do. So we're also working with realtors, we're working with the banks, we're working with people that, and I should say, or people or entities that do have those resources and take the headache off of the homeowner so that they don't necessarily have to find the contractor. We're doing the work. I've been one of the ones up in the attic. I've walked around the basement. I've been in the crawl space. And I'm learning so much for myself, but also it's a training ground for those life skills. And again, I have I guess, a personal stake because I want people to know that, yes, higher education is good, but there's also a lack of people for the trades, the skills, the electricians, the plumbers, the HVAC workers, those pipe fitters, those people that they learn those trades, and those skills can take them through their lifetime, elevate their status throughout their lifetime. They go into the apprentice program, and then they're able to sustain those livable wages. So it's been a good aspect. And I say again that it's more working with people, making the connection with the homeowners, with those people that are in those underserved areas, helping them with the resources. If we can't personally do the work, well, we want to refer them to another agency or another entity that is able to do that, and not just, we're done, that's all we can do, and leave you. We follow up throughout the years. And one of the great things about Green Homeowners United is we want to put people on a roadmap to make their home more energy efficient. And it's not going to happen this year, it's not going to happen next year, but over the lifetime that they're in that particular structure, we want to help them in whatever way we can. And we'll be with them for the long haul. And again, we want to see that improvement. And we don't work just in Milwaukee. We're in the rural areas. We've done quite a bit of work throughout the state of Wisconsin. But again, our focus is on those underserviced or brown, Black communities that we want to see something done and provide whatever help and resources we can.
Yeah, and I like the idea of a roadmap to making your home more energy efficient, right? Because there's so many immediate needs, it seems, in everybody's day-to-day life. And so it's one of those things that people kind of put on the back burner, but so it's not, you need to spend, $25,000 this month and do everything. It's, how do we make you more energy efficient every year so that, you can meet those things, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And many times it's simply just having a conversation with the homeowner or with a person that's residing in that unit and helping them to understand what their discomforts are and what they can do about it. And if there is some avenue to address those issues, well, we want to help them to be able to address those items. But again, it's just communication and education. That's what we do.
Yeah, very cool. And so, I mean, Minneapolis is kind of the epicenter of a lot of the tensions, a lot of the beginning of the tensions that started in 2020. So Becca, what's, the climate, and I live in Minneapolis, so I understand a little bit about the climate here as well, but, what's your take and what is Sunrise doing to address the needs of the community?
Well, first I should recognize your t-shirt, Madonna, because I know that, I know where that is in Minneapolis. So in any case, the community has known us as a do good bank since we've started. It's been in our DNA. So everything we've done from a product and services perspective always has that lens. But I think, when 2020 rolled around and our tellers were getting shot at, our branch managers were calling us, saying the house 2 down from them is on fire. And, how can I protect my family? It really gave us an opportunity to step up in the community and provide what we call hope and opportunity for good to happen. And so we did that in a myriad of different ways. I'm chief brand officer, so you're getting the marketing person here telling you what we've done. So it is a little bit more creative, and I'm hoping to be able to share my screen because I was going to show you some photos. But so one of the things that we did, for example, is, our branches continued to have bricks thrown through the windows. We had to close them up. We had to lock them up. And so even the area that, where, our branches were located, it was just desolate. It was like no one was there anymore because there was so much damage that was going on. And so when we had to board up and I'm hoping everyone can see, trying to talk and do this at the same time here, but instead of just boarding up our windows, we wanted to, again, give some sort of hope. And so we would put up MLK and the words LOVE. Can everyone see that on the screen? Okay,
Yes.
cool. Thanks, Sergio. And then, here's another picture. We put it up a quote of, I've decided to stick with love because hate is too great of a burden to bear. And so what we end up seeing is that people were taking photos of it on Instagram. There were a lot of footage of all the damage and the hate and just the ugliness that was happening and the despair. But to really showcase hope and opportunity gave a different light, especially from a bank. And then, as we fast forward through, get past 2020 and we get into 21, a lot of conversations are still happening. But when we started talking about, how can we really uplift this community together and really showcase the good that was going on, we started looking to our BIPOC entrepreneurs and really, see if I can get to that screen. Here we go. We started a Banking on Change campaign where we focused in on, you're going to see in the bottom right is Janita Flowers. She is a friend of mine. She's an entrepreneur who survived domestic abuse. And she started Janita's Jar, which is now in stores nationwide, specifically Target. And Janita's Jar, most of their profits goes towards domestic abuse survivors. I have another friend of mine, Mike Jackson, who runs Black Tech Talent here in Minneapolis. And his whole goal is, how do I uplift young Black men to be able to get into the IT community and connect them to other IT opportunities? We have the gentleman up above, Ahmed, who started Apadana, and you'll see they're the solar panels. And he started this company because his 8-year-old daughter said, "Hey, Dad, what are you doing for the future?" "Well, I'm saving for your college." "No, what are you doing to save the planet?" And so these stories have just been not only uplifting for the community, but when I have these entrepreneurs come up to me and say, "Thank you for doing this. Thank you for sharing this story," because this is what's going to help this community survive and to heal from all of this pain and to find a way forward in the darkness.
Thank you, Becca. Yeah, I mean, I know Sunrise has given some loans to some business owners that I know that are starting out now too. So I know you guys are doing a lot of stuff, not just to like financially, give loans out and bank and do the business stuff tactics, right? But it's also that stuff that you're doing community wide is very important. That's a special touch point that not a lot of people, as you drove by, there are just a lot of like plywood stuff up, and it is cool to see this. And I do want to mention, if anybody has a question, feel free to put it in the chat and we can talk about it. And we'll just keep going also. But so for each of you, for any of the panelists to jump in and talk about this, what is effective? What are effective routes, as B Corps that you use to work with nonprofits and governments? I know JP mentioned a little bit having kind of that insider feel, but does that also tie in nonprofits in St. Louis, or is it just, is it we focus mainly on working with the government, or how does that work in your world?
All right, I should unmute myself so you can hear me. No, it's not so specific to government. It's just, government is typically the biggest elephant in the room. It takes up the most mass. Obviously, it has the most reach. But in St. Louis, and I don't know about the other communities that Saidirick and Becca deals with locally, but we like to say in St. Louis we have a nonprofit industrial complex. When there is something that needs to be handled by government, but government can't handle it, a lot of rich corporations, form these nonprofits, or you have a lot of nonprofits that are already formed, and as a tax write-off, a lot of these very wealthy entities, give a percentage, of their income to these organizations, which does two things. One, it proliferates more nonprofits to do repetitive work, um, eh, typically led by folks that aren't experiencing the harm that's been done in the community over generations. So you're spinning your wheels. And then the other benefit is to the actual corporation, because they get to look like they're doing some good when effectively they're lowering their tax rate. So we try to work with all entities, um, because when you leave one out, ultimately that's a community that you're missing out on, and that's a community's voice that ultimately gets stifled, even if it's unintentional. Harm is not necessarily always intentional, but it has severe impacts. So us as an LLC, we endeavored to do a couple of things. One, work arm in arm with government where we found it possible and where we can be of a benefit. We didn't just want to do menial work, just to, get resources. That was the case, that's what the private sector's for us, right? To pay our bills. So we wanted to have a discernible impact. But the second piece was, if we're going to work with nonprofits, we wanted to work with, 501c3 and 4s. And in some cases, 5, we work with unions as well, where we're working with Black, Indigenous, or women-led nonprofits. And we would use our connection to government to help prop those organizations up. That way, they're not missing out on the resource dissemination when it typically happens from these bigger corporations. And while corporations do have a lot of sway over government, when government decides to actually govern, a corporation will get in line. At least that is the case locally. And so using that connective tissue, right, being that conduit for these entities has seen some benefits for us. An example is we have a Black-led organization called Action St. Louis, where our executive director, Alicia Cagle, actually writes grants for them. And she's able to do that in part because of our collective connection to government. She actually is a director of innovative services at Bi-State, which is a pact between Illinois and Missouri that was formulated under Harry Truman back in, let's say, 1950. And it deals with economic development across the Mississippi, but it also runs the transit system in the city of St. Louis, going out into the county and also into Illinois. So having those connections allow Lisa to utilize her expertise in grant writing, but our connection in government to a lot of these other grant-making organizations to ensure that this Black-led organization called Action St. Louis had the resources that they needed. In turn, Action is a base-building operation that ensures Black folks who have been in these disinvested communities and aren't typical partners when change making is actually happening from a governing perspective, actually finally have a seat at the table. And I find that important because if we're going to make any significant change, I loved Becca's example with Dr. Martin Luther King and how she had that outside the bank. One of the other things King talked about was, a lot of times our people are actually done the most harm by moderates. King said white moderates, but typically it's those folks that have it easy, have it good, do the bare minimum of change that makes them feel good, but nothing transformative or innovative actually happens. And so when we continue to operate in this system where we do the bare minimum amount of good that makes us feel better. We actually don't see anything transformative on the other end. And then another generation goes by and the same problems that we were talking about 2 or 3 generations ago, they still exist. And that's literally, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting a different result, but deep down knowing that there won't be a different result, except we get a little bit more gray. And so for us, it's all about the community. It's all about the credibility that we have, connections that we can ferment, and making sure we're using one vertical to get another vertical parallel in terms of success. And it's always centering those folks that are the most impacted because they're the folks that actually have the solutions. They've been screaming about these solutions forever. Now it's time to put resources and actions behind it so that we can actually make some innovative impact.
Yes. Yeah. Really appreciate that, JP. Cedric, I'm interested how you work with the Milwaukee city government or the state government. If you guys have any help in regards to, as you're trying to support these homeowners and becoming more energy efficient, like that's obviously stuff that's dictated by, the different codes and stuff. So do you guys have close relationships there as well?
Yes, we do. And JP, I understand you have gatekeepers everywhere. And I say gatekeepers because there is a certain, I guess, procedures that you have to go through in order to work with many government agencies. I believe where we've actually made a lot of impact is we basically came off of a community organizing organization. They were endeavoring to Citizens Action of Wisconsin. They were endeavoring to resolve stuff or help with these problems, help with these items, and finding roadblocks, again, gatekeepers that would not help us to forward our momentum, every time. So we branched off and we said, well, okay, we'll do it. And it goes back to the on the ground, boots on the ground, reaching out to the community, reaching out to people where they're at. We would go to their homes, we would canvass the area, knocking on doors, getting their story, finding out what's affecting them, because many times government is so far removed from the actual issues. And we find that working with some of the entities such as the Public Service Commission, working with the city of Milwaukee, their energy efficiency program, reaching out to them, but because of our community organizing, we have developed relationships over time that they know that we mean what we say, we're going to do what we say. We understand the issues, we understand the concerns. And sometimes the gatekeepers that you knock, okay, well, let me give this guy a try. Let me give this company a try. They've done everything. And realistically, it's finding out what people's needs are, finding out how we can service those, and leveraging really the neighborhood improvement districts that they have funds that all the homeowners have contributed to over the years, and they don't even know about the opportunity that's there. So again, many times because people just are ignorant of the resources out there, they simply do not know. And we want to help them with that. The local labor union, again, it's something, it's personal. We know these folks. We've worked with them. In sharing our story, it really does help. Like I said, when it gets personal and I share my story, someone else can connect with that. And even if they are in a capacity where they're working officially with procedurals and things of that sort, if I can touch their heart, then I can get them to help me along the way. But if they see that I'm only in it for the money, or that the company that I work for or our group is only in for it for the money, they're just like everyone else. So we take a personal approach. We also work with the the local focus on energy. So we are focused on energy, contractor, approved contractor, and we have a history of going in and taking those rough jobs that no one else wanted to do, but we've been able to go in, make the homes more livable, make the homes better, leave them in better condition, and also give the homeowner a sense of, well, hey, what can I do next? What's next on the agenda? What's next on my roadmap? Um, and I think it's just a personal approach and treating everyone as they are the most important, because the customer that you're working with is the most important customer. And that's what we endeavor to do. Even if it is a government entity, that's that customer. So let me treat them as they are the most important.
Awesome. Thank you, Cedric. Yeah, very interesting. And then, yeah, Becca, how does, I mean, a bank operates with a lot of different groups. How do you guys work with city government, state government? What's important about those relationships?
No, and it's a great question. It's great to hear what JP and Saidirick is doing. As a bank that banks literally thousands of nonprofits, and also being primarily a small business bank, we have such an opportunity to make connections with people. And so when we think about who do we bring to the table, it's those who are socially minded, who have an entrepreneurial spirit, who are mission focused. I'll share a couple of examples with you, but before I do, I wanted to share a couple of concepts that we talk about at leadership at Sunrise. And one is connecting the head and the heart. So the worst thing that an organization can do is live in a silo and not talk to the community and just think that, similar to the white moderates that you mentioned, JP, oh, we know, this works for us. It doesn't impact us. We'll do minimal work. We liken it to a marker. So connecting the head with the heart, because if you connect them, the marker's going to last, right? So if you connect your head and the heart, you're going to make more of an impact, or that marker is going to be darker, right? The other example or concept that I wanted to share was we talk about being eco-centric. Many brands, many organizations out there are very ego-centric. It's all about the brand. It's all about what we do. It's all about showing that check, that we donated to. But it's not about the ecosystem that's out there and the impact that could be made and could be multiplied if you start connecting all these people together. And so we call it impact multiplier, or how can we impact multiplier relationship. So a couple of examples of that is a few years back, and it's still a crisis, I would say, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but it really came to light is the affordable housing situation. And so, we saw Seattle having crisis, we saw New York, we saw San Francisco having a crisis, and we know that things, start on the coast and they come to where we live in the Midwest, right? So we knew it was coming, and we were experiencing some of it. So what we did is we got together. We have a group. We've had this advisory committee made up of a diverse group of influencers, and we brought the problem to them. And we've had this committee for about 10 years now. We brought this problem to them, and they helped us ideate and form a solution to be able to help, in place Minneapolis, St. Paul affordable housing development organizations, so they could snag up this land or this apartment building and have ready cash without having the new developer come in and sweep up and take it. So we built this CDC, Community Development Corporation, which is a fund of money. So it's easy cash that these affordable housing companies can come in, take it, borrow it right away without question. They snag up, and so they preserve that affordable housing before the developers come in. Another example that we're currently working on is climate. What do we know about climate? There is a lack of equity. We know that, when we look at specifically Vancouver, for example. I'm going to put in a plug for my podcast, Next Gen Baker podcast, but I did an episode last year with Kate Hammer, who's from Van City Credit Union. And they're, I would say, like-minded organization like us, a do-good social engine bank, or credit union rather. And what happened is the atmospheric river was going on, and there was so much flooding that people were losing their homes. And it was happening in low and moderate income areas. But what happens? They don't have access to credit. They don't have the ability to build a new home. They didn't have house insurance like all of us, most of us do. And so they were stuck. And so they had to develop programs around climate equity and to ensure that people would have access to protection from our changing planet. And in addition, when we think about, Saidirick, what you're doing and creating government program or working with the government to ensure that low to moderate income areas have access to solar pumps, our solar panels, have access to electric pumps so that we can preserve our planet. That is something that we're currently working on right now with not only with PACE, but also some other entities that we've been talking to. So it's really, again, it's putting that head and the heart together and being eco-centric.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Becca. Yeah, the affordable housing piece is kind of an interesting topic to bring up because it's one of those things that Minneapolis has been trying to heavily invest in, and it's important, but it also, kind of what JP's typing, maybe JP wants to say something about it, but it's one of those things that it kind of, I don't know, that people feel many different ways about it. I don't know if you had something you wanted to comment on that, JP.
Oh, no, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, it's one of those, it polls well, right? And we all want affordable housing, but it's two things, like what is actually affordable, right? Even before we got to, 8.3% in inflation for this quarter, a lot of discretionary income that folks have, goes to bills, or necessities. It gets wiped out. So we don't really know what affordable is, unfortunately, right? There is not a definable circumstance for affordable for a lot of people. Again, St. Louis has 30% poverty rate, but also when it's legislated, one, you don't have a lot of funds in housing. Two, a lot of times it goes to apartment complexes that are built by huge developers that get a lot of tips and abatements that they don't need, which tends to take away from the public school system or any other government entity that needs those funds. And the third thing is when it does get legislated, it's normally in pockets of the city that aren't of mixed use, meaning you're not going to have, children and families, rising tide lifts all boats. You're not going to have that. You're going to have concentrated poverty in other areas of the city that are going to continue to struggle, while on the other side of it, you're going to have concentrated wealth, which means you're going to have inherent disparities within the city. So even if you're bringing in a lot of tax revenue, like in New York, you will still get, areas of the Bronx that look far different from areas of Brooklyn, right? And so, really what you need is more of a green line fund that absolutely ameliorates, the redlining that happening with housing going back to, 30s, 40s, 50s, et cetera. Because unless affordable housing is actually meant to buy houses, so you can actually build wealth amongst the poorest of us who don't have anything to pass on, then it's everything I just said prior.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think that affordable housing is something that it would be more important to create that financial equity in people that can buy homes, right? Buy homes, own homes, pass on wealth. That's, I think, one of the biggest glaring misses in the last 50 years that has created a lot of inequality, and it would be that would be a really significant program if to pass on to government, right? So create housing developments that people can buy into more easily and create that as affordable housing, as opposed to allow these big complex apartment developers build stuff and just retain tax credits. The whole system behind it is a little a little skewed to bigger developers.
It is operating as designed.
Right. Which is operating as designed. Yeah. Go ahead.
And JP, I really think you hit on something, because there are root systemic problems in so many facets of our country. I look at banking. There are systemic issues in banking. For example, credit scores. How, credit scores is a perfect example of how there is zero equity. It's if you, treated by the credit gods, well, then you score well, right? But if you pay your rent on time, if you pay your car payment on time, or if you pay, your phone bill, you're not getting credit for that phone bill. You're not getting credit for that rent. And so, we challenge ourselves at Sunrise, like, what can we do to break these systemic issues? And this is going to be a battle we're going to be facing for quite some time.
1,000%. Well said.
Yeah. Well, looks like Bridge is asking a question. Yeah. How do each of your organizations work to address the systemic or root causes? So yeah, Saidirick, you talked about it a little bit. How do you guys try to get to systemic or root causes of inequality, in your space?
We go back to and that's a very good question. We go back to the grassroots, getting people that are in those areas, training them with the skills so that they can earn those livable wages. And it's not just that they're going to be earning wages, but they're learning skills that throughout their lifetime. For me, I would say, for a young man, I would tell a young Black man, learn a skill, develop that skill, take a business class, and then open up your own business. It's one of those things where we don't necessarily want to address those issues right off the bat, and it's going to take time, but I think we have a generation that we're missing, that are missing those skills that are going to take them throughout their lifetime. We want to train them, and Green Homeowners, we're going to train. We have a work development program. We're reaching out to employers, Employ Milwaukee. We're working with those agencies to train people so that they can develop those skills. And as a Black man, a minority, owning his own business, or if he's a returning citizen, he was out of society for a bit. Well, we know those opportunities are limited, but for him, if he learns that skill, and then he can provide for himself and his family for the rest of his life, open up his own business. Now, he doesn't necessarily have to be, blackballed because of what he did in the past, or he or she did in the past. And I think it's one of the things that we take personally is, again, just as Becca said, we're not, well, we're looking at this and that's all that we look at. But we want to look at the whole person. We want to look at the whole, what is the culture that they're in, and how can we help? And again, it's something that we have to take personally. I want to be able to help that person. And if I can help one person, that's great. Then he helps someone else. He owns his own business. Now he can employ other people. And I think it's just one of those things where starting the ball rolling is going to help. That's what we endeavor to do. Get the ball rolling. Start somewhere. Do something. We can all do something.
Yeah, I think that's a very, it's a holistic thing, right? And it's not just like give somebody a job or give them a house. Create the opportunity for somebody to learn how to do something, create, be able to go to a bank and get a loan to create a business where they can go back and hire people like themselves to continue to, and then build them up, right? And that's an opportunity that has been missed in the minority community in the United States. And that's, that is if you look at every root cause and try to stamp it out one at a time, you don't put out the fire, right? You have to look at it holistic. So yeah, very, very good. I guess, we're running short. We're running down to the end time. Does anybody have a last save thing that they'd like to say, or
I would just add on to what Saidirick was saying. I feel like to address systemic issues, it's almost like an onion, right? Because every time you peel back the onion, there's more, and then there's more, and there's more, and it can become overwhelming.
It makes you cry.
I really think, because you don't learn this when you go get your finance degree, right? You don't learn this when, you're starting your first job, at least in banking. I'm thinking from the finance world right now. For me, it's about education. I need to educate my bankers so they can understand all of these layers and then use innovation to tear apart those layers and get rid of those systemic problems that we're left with after decades.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that both Cedric and Becca, I mean, they're spot on. I mean, I'll add that I think you're right, Sergio, the holistic nature of it, right? I mean, it's all intersection, right? You can't stamp out racism without stamping out sexism, without stamping out, how the fiscal system is designed to keep folks down, gatekeeping, as you said earlier. So it's the intersection nature of tackling, all of these issues. I like to call it flooding the zone, right? Because you don't want to get stuck playing a game of whack-a-mole.
Right.
Right. That's exhausting, and we're all fatigued for a lot of different reasons. But it's really a system redesign, right? And I think once we all get comfortable in the uncomfortable, and the uncomfortable is the system that we're in is working as intended, and we're not going to be able to tinker with this system. We're not going to be able to fix this system. We need to redesign the entire structure. We got to do that foundation. And once enough of us get there and attain the positions that we can, ultimately attain, right? Get a skill set, have some ownership over yourself, and whatever entity that it is that you're trying to employ yourself and others. Then you can start to see the fruits, right, of all this ideation and co-creation.
Well, I'd really appreciate everybody on the panel. Thank you so much for your time today. I thought it was a really good discussion. I hope everybody else that was listening got something out of it. I'm sure you guys did, because it was very engaging. Thank you all. And we're going to pass it back to Alice.
Great. Thank you so much, Sergio, and thank you again to our panelists, Becca, JP, and really appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. So thank you so much. I also want to give a quick plug and shout out to another one of our sponsors today, Global Prairie. So thank you to Global Prairie for supporting this, our first Midwest Build conference. We're really excited to be here. Our next and final panel is going to be unpacking the magic behind B Corp governance.